the UK market is a perfect scenario for Canoo because one, our vehicle is very compact. It has, as I mentioned, very high payload, up to ton payload or ton plus payload, but it's also on the wheelbase of a Prius. So when you think about narrow roads, Europe, UK, tight turns, blind corners, there's a lot of benefits to our vehicle being in a very compact platform.
All right, welcome back inside our proactive newsroom. And joining me now is Greg Ethridge. He is the Chief Financial Officer for Canoo. And Greg, it's great to see you. How are you?
I'm good this morning, Steve. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Good to have you along. Good to learn a bit more about your company. Fascinating company with a lot of different layers to it. And we're going to go through a number of them, but maybe just give us an overall view inside of the company Canoo.
Yeah, just very quick history. Founded in 2017. We're a technology equipment manufacturer. So the way we think about it is we're a mobility company that provides both the hardware and software solutions to our customers. We're focused today on commercial and government fleet opportunities. The original premise of the company when it was founded was consumer facing, but we transitioned with the leadership of our CEO, Tony Aquila, focused on really what we think is the sweetest part of the market in the commercial and government fleet area, and also has the most impact on the sustainability and the on the economic side for our customers. So we thought that was the area to focus, and we've taken what was a blank sheet of paper platform with a ton of flexibility, what we call our multi-purpose platform. That's a BEV platform, and then I've been offering basically Class 1 and Class 2 cargo vans to our customers over the last really 2 years. Built up this tremendous backlog. And are starting to deliver on that backlog to our customers like Walmart, NASA, DoD, Postal Service, and now some customers in the Middle East and the UK as well.
Yeah, there's been so much focus on obviously the consumer vehicles and what's going to be sort of the next generation of those vehicles, that the need for company vehicles is massive. You mentioned some there like NASA, Postal Service. I mean, we can imagine the vehicles they're using. So great opportunity here, it sounds like.
It is. It's a very phenomenal opportunity. And for electrification, I'm sure you guys know this, but just as a kind of a quick recap, obviously with, Tesla really pushing the boundaries on the consumer side, they made massive inroads, right? But the consumer use case is very different than the commercial route-based or government route-based use case. So there, with the unknowns, around range anxiety, et cetera, you don't have any of that on the commercial and the government side because largely you know exactly what that vehicle is going to be used for, how many shifts a day it's going to be used, how many miles a day it's going to be driven. And so you can kind of tailor the solution to that customer and what their use case is to solve and also optimize the cost, right, for that particular customer. So we use a modular system, which includes modular components, but also a modular battery. And that allows us to really think about our vehicle that's, EPA range tested up to almost 220 miles on a single charge. We're able to kind of customize that depending on what the use case is for that particular customer. So Postal Service on average, for example, has a 30-mile daily route. Well, they don't need 220 miles of battery. So I can drop the price down hypothetically for them, or come up with some other. Now they may have a range of options for that vehicle, so maybe they want the full battery. But there are ways with our vehicle to be able to effectively customize and configure that meets the specific needs for that customer.
Okay, I want to ask you about some couple of pieces of news that you had out recently. Very significant pieces of news. One involved the foreign trade zone, and maybe you can kind of explain this to people and why this is so significant for your company.
Yeah, so getting the foreign trade zone status is quite a long process, and it's given out kind of by Borders and Customs Patrol, and effectively what it allows us to it's an incentive, right, to manufacture in the U.S. So to the extent we're importing parts, which very few of our parts are really imported. 90% of our BOM cost, our bill of materials for our vehicles, is U.S. and allied nations, and then 10% is not. So obviously that 10% is imported, plus some of the 90% that's from allied nations is imported. So to the extent we are building in that FTZ certified location and then exporting, we are not subject to any customs and duties. So it drops our BOM cost and it increases our margin by approximately 5%. So that's obviously a huge benefit as we think about a global operation, manufacturing, imported, completed vehicles. That's a big benefit. There's also some working capital benefits to the extent we import those parts and then sell domestically. There's deferrals on those same customs and duties. So I think we were the fifth CERT FTZ in the state of Oklahoma, and there's less than 300 FTZs in the whole country. It was it's a long process, right? An extensive kind of, regulatory scrutinized process. But we were happy to get that announced. And obviously it facilitates some of these international opportunities that we're pursuing as well.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because you did talk about recently in a news release about the UK and the what that market's going to do for your company and expansion into there.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The UK market is a perfect scenario for Canoo because one, our vehicle is very compact. It has, as I mentioned, very high payload, up to ton payload or ton plus payload, but it's also on the wheelbase of a Prius. So when you think about narrow roads, Europe, UK, tight turns, blind corners, there's a lot of benefits to our vehicle being in a very compact platform. In addition, when we produced the vehicles for the U.S. Postal Service, we used our proprietary steer-by-wire technology to shift from what would be obviously in the U.S. a left-hand drive to a right-hand drive Postal Service vehicle because they're delivering the mail on the right-hand drive, out of the right door. We took that technology and that use case for Postal Service and said, hey, the right-hand drive market globally is quite large, right? Let's take this over to the UK and demo it, which we did in April. And we met with, I think, 10 of the top 15 commercial fleet operators there and had tremendous feedback because our vehicle really fits almost all of their use cases given the size and payload capacities. So we've been working for the last 6 or so months to develop those relationships, convert several of those relationships into pilots, and we believe we'll be announcing some pilots here in the near term around some key UK commercial customers. So that's really exciting. And obviously, from the sales cycle on the commercial side tends to be long, on the government side tends to be long. So you go from that initial intro to a pilot process, which takes time, right, to get the vehicle in the hands of a customer. They can test it for anywhere from 30 to 90 days. And then you convert it into a sales agreement. And then you eventually, obviously, convert it into many, many deliveries. And so that's just the process. So we thought it was important for us to start that in the UK market, to start to incubate those kind of key customers that we want to build relationships with. And that's what we've really been focused on in the UK market. And look, again, the feedback has been nothing short of tremendous from the potential customer base over there.
So, Greg, we're closing in on the end of 2024, looking soon to 2025. Some thoughts about what's ahead for the company. Obviously, these pilots are significant for you, but other things you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, look, there's obviously a lot of initiatives, and I think that we're very much a milestone-focused company right now. We're still relatively young, right? We're still in this process of ramping up production and obviously building up and high grading our backlog and customer base. So I think from a milestone perspective, obviously continue to make meaningful progress towards our step level ramp and into 2025 production. I think that these pilots and continuing to build on our sales pipeline are really important from the business perspective, and also further validations that we already have right on our vehicles, but validations internationally with our LDV 130, 190, and our future 300, which are the size of those vehicles, as kind of small, medium, and large. And continuing to check the boxes on some of these key progress points for a company like ours. So again, we think of it, there's lots of different verticals around the milestones, and we track them all very closely. And obviously, we're pursuing all of them in parallel, and some of them are going to happen faster than others.
There you go. Greg, you have a fascinating company. Enjoyed hearing you talk about it. Thank you so much, my friend, and good to see you. And we'll talk again. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to meet you.
All right, there's a Greg Ethridge. He is the Chief Financial Officer for Canoo.